Morning. Welcome to the Food Standards Agency's November 2020 board meeting. It's very good to have those joining us watching this meeting or who are going to catch up with it on YouTube or other channels later. As board members all know and our exec colleagues know, but just in case you're new to the FSA board meetings, we split our board meetings into 3 parts during the pandemic. Otherwise, we'd be meeting for a whole day, and that's not the most effective way to operate remotely. So this board meeting is largely our regular annual updates that the board receive on important areas of business for the FSA. And we'll also be welcoming Julie Hill, who's the Deputy Chair of Advisory Committee on Social Sciences, to talk us through the work of that committee. If we need it, there'll be a short break at 11:10, but I'm not sure we will need it. We'll just see how we get on with the agenda. Later in December, early December actually, we'll be having meetings looking at our general performance and resources areas of activity and also more strategic areas of board business. So if you think something's missing from this agenda, it's likely to be happening in early December. Could I ask board members if they've got any conflicts of interest to declare on the agenda, please? Thank you. And does anybody have any other business that they wish to raise at the end of the meeting? No. In which case, I'm going to invite Stephen Pollock, who's our Director of Communications, to share the questions from members of the public that we've received in advance of this board meeting. Stephen. Doesn't seem to be able to speak.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you, Stephen. Go ahead.
Good. So, thank you, Chair. I had a little bit of trouble joining the meeting, so I've just joined, so bear with me 1 second. And we have today's questions from members of the public. There are 4 questions. 2 came through the usual email route and 2 were via Twitter on social media. The first is from Dennis Tracy, who is founder of a company called Culture Compass. Dennis's question is, my experience and evidence suggests our increasing reliance on auditing, for example, by the British Retail Consortium, Global Food Safety Initiative, Safe and Local Supplier Approval, as the single measure of the capability of food producers to demonstrate food safety, has shifted our internal technical capabilities from risk assessment to audit preparation and response, increasing the likelihood of mistakes at design and change points. Is this a recognised concern for the FSA as we prepare for life outside the European Union? The second question comes from Paula Wilkinson, and Paula is director of a national online platform called Mums Bake Cakes. Now, the introduction in question was quite a long one, so I have summarised the key points. And I believe that one of my director colleagues will also take this matter up online with Ms. Wilkinson. But the question for the record was, and in summary, in the introduction to our question, Ms. Wilkinson thanks Mark Davies, head of the Delivery Support Unit in our Regulatory Compliance Division, for a very constructive meeting to discuss online home businesses and food safety regulations. And the question is about various aspects of the search function and capability on the FHRS database and whether this can be reviewed, and also about the reporting of non-registered businesses. And as I say, that question will be picked up offline directly with Ms. Wilkinson. The third question, which came through on Twitter, and that was from Keith Warrener, is, why don't the FSA promote the use of meat thermometers for verifying cooking of products such as burgers and nuggets? And the final question, which also came through on Twitter, had no name, but the Twitter username is HeidiBearK1. And the question is, does the Food Standards Agency have inspectors who visit factory farms without warning? And that concludes the questions for the board this month.
Stephen, thank you very much. I'm sorry you were in a bit of a last-minute kerfuffle there and joining the meeting. Thank you for making it. Just to remind board members and people who are listening who've submitted those questions, where they're appropriate to the agenda, we try to pick them up through the course of the discussion of those board papers. If they aren't covered in the course of the meeting, well, actually, anyway, there will be a full response given to the questioner, and that will be shared via our website so that that's open to all members of the public on those questions. Moving on then, I turn to the minutes of our last board meeting on the 16th of September. These were circulated in draft to board members, so can I confirm that they are an accurate record of our meeting? Thank you. And the note of actions arising, which has been shared with us, is there anything that board members wish to pick up in terms of progress on those actions from previous meetings? Are we content with progress? Good. My report to the board, a list of my engagements since the September board meeting has been published on our website as usual. Don't really have very much to update the board on that's not already on the agenda, so I'll pick it up there. I did want to just be clear that I will relinquish my FSA appointment at the end of January 2021. The board know this. Following my election a year ago as Master of St John's College in Cambridge. I and the board, we're all concerned about progress in publicising, advertising this public appointment so far, and indeed other vacant roles on the board. I do want the board to know that I and colleagues are doing all that we can to stress the urgency of progressing the need to fill these posts. I think it's particularly important when the public are going to be looking even more to the FSA for independent assurance on food safety and standards as we move fully beyond the EU and the continuing challenges of COVID-19. I am absolutely confident that the team at the FSA are doing all they can to stress the need for progress, but the matter is out of our hands, unfortunately. Other than that, there was nothing I wish to update the board on as chair, but do the board have any questions for me before we move on to the chief exec? No, in which case, Emily, your report.
Thank you very much, Heather. Good morning, everyone. So you'll see that in my report this time, I've not just looked back at the previous quarter, I've also looked back on the whole of 2020. And it's left me feeling a huge sense of pride in what the Food Standards Agency has done, but actually also what civil servants in the public sector have done across the nation in the last few months. And looking into the Food Standards Agency at the moment, people are still doing really amazing work, making a big difference, but they are tired. And I know that well-being, particularly at this point when many of us are in lockdown, and the weather's drawing in and someone is feeling more of a challenge at the moment. So I just wanted to say a big thank you again. I do this often, but I want to say again a big thank you to our staff for the difference that they're making. And a particular mention for those who are holding lots of uncertainties around our EU exit work, which I'll come on to in a second, and for our field operations staff who day in, day out make sure that the public has food they can trust. I wanted also to do a sort of look forward to the next year, but found it quite difficult to look over the horizon of the 31st of December because the end of the transition period is coming and we still have some uncertainty about how life will feel in January for the food industry. On our EU exit work, there has been lots of good progress. But we're also ready for that uncertainty ahead. So on Monday, we stood up our emergency response capability, which is a rhythm of situation reports and daily meetings and a briefing cell, which can respond in a very agile fashion to whatever comes. And we're dealing with these two concurrent issues, the consequences of the end of the transition period and also the consequences of COVID. And that's what we mean by winter planning. So on EU exit, there has been really good progress. It's epitomised for me this week. We've been holding these seminars and last week on our risk analysis process, on the regulated products authorisation process. And it's been attended by hundreds of people from the business community and elsewhere finding out about how we will be taking on these processes from the European Commission, and lots of really good questions and a sense that actually we really are going to be starting to do this advice to ministers on the safety of products and other factors to do with those products. We've also seen the health and ID marks guidance come out. We've got one last bit of additional guidance on the early application of identification marks that is coming out today. We'll be issuing instructions to our official vets and meat plants on this question of early application of health marks in the coming days. And we've got further meetings planned with stakeholders to work through the practical application of these issues. And we've done a lot of progress on frameworks, especially the one we lead on, which is Food and Feed. These are the frameworks for all 4 nations of the UK to work together. But we are carrying risk, especially in relation to Northern Ireland, and that's detailed in paragraphs 19 and 20 of my report, so I won't go into further detail here, but I just want to say that that is there. We also, even in the last few days, we've been in further conversations with DEFRA about export health certificates for products of animal origin, which as a whole, the industry will need to acquire additional veterinary input because there will be increased certificates required. DEFRA and APHA lead on this issue for government, and the expectation from them is that the private sector vets would supply the EHCs, but we are wanting, if we can, to provide support and contribute any expertise and any available official vet capacity that we have, we will try and help DEFRA with too. We also, though, need to make sure we can keep meat plants open and that other compulsory official controls do continue. I mentioned a poem in my report, which was Thomas Hardy's poem about the Titanic and the convergence of the twain. And I want to just reflect on EU exit for a second. So we have been planning for this moment in January since July 2016. We've done a huge amount. We've with ministers' help, laid statutory instruments. We've done lots of work with industry. We've provided guidance. We've built new capabilities around surveillance and data. We've taken on new responsibilities, and there's lots where I am confident that it will go well. But I think it would be vain to suggest that we know everything that is coming. We've got the pandemic coupled with the biggest change to importing and exporting for industry for nearly 50 years. And there will be things we hadn't thought of. And that's why the emergency response I mentioned at the start is so important, so that we can be agile and flexible to what comes up. But to finish on an upbeat note, there is life beyond the 1st of January 2021. And we in the executive have started talking about what the possibilities are that come to us from being outside the EU. And we think there are ways that we can make it easier for businesses to do the right thing for consumers. And we can do more to look out for the consumer interest. So we are looking forward to that as well. Thank you.
Emily, thank you very much for that. And for such a thoughtful report and analysis as well. It's really good to take the time to have that reflection and understand where we are and where we're going. I think I'll say to start with, so that we don't all have to say it, but the board absolutely want to amplify the thanks that you've given there to all of our people and everybody who's working with them on a sustainable and safe food supply and on preparing for the end of transition. And we know there are still lots of unanswered questions, and they're not in our gift to answer about that. But the whole board would, I know, want to echo your appreciation of that. And in terms of who I'm going to first, Tim.
Thank you, and good morning. And yes, thanks, Emily and team. I think managing to keep going under very difficult circumstances and make progress is fantastic. So thank you. I just wanted to pick up on your para 28 around small abattoirs. Fantastic to see the joint approach. I didn't see APHA involvement on that, so it might be interesting just to hear back from you on that. It'd also be interesting to hear in the future, I think, around what the objectives will be for that group and its planned outcomes, and perhaps these could be available at a future board. I also recognise this is not an issue wholly in the purview or gift of the FSA, but really appreciate the work we're doing in participating and promoting. 2 points, one main point I want to raise is just on traceability and looking at potential concessions around administrative burden and bureaucracy to small abattoirs. On traceability, involvement in the Livestock Information Programme, the LIP, is going to be critical, and it's going to be as critical, I think, for small abattoirs.
I'm not sure if that's just me who's lost Tim's question. No. Will we try and bring him back? Do you want to pick up the start of it, Emily?
Thank you. Yes, so I believe that the Animal and Plant Health Agency has been involved with the group, but Colin Sullivan can confirm if I've got that correct. The Livestock Information Project is indeed key. It's led by DEFRA. In fact, Julie Pearce sits on the steering board for it, so we have a good input there as well. And in terms of the objectives of the Small Abattoirs Group, the thing that we are particularly focused on from the FSA's point of view is how to reduce bureaucracy. And there are other issues that are affecting small abattoirs that are not in the FSA's gift in the same way. So, for instance, economic support to them, which would be a matter for DEFRA. But that for us is the joining up between the different agencies who put requirements on this part of the industry is what we're particularly interested in. I don't know if Colin wants to come in.
Yes, so my understanding is that APHA have been involved in those conversations, although it's been primarily with our policy colleagues in DEFRA. But yes, those conversations are ongoing.
I think we have lost Tim. He did come back momentarily. Hopefully we'll get him back shortly. We'll move on, Colin.
Sure, thank you. And if I can just echo both the Chair and Tim's comments, Emily, on the terrific work that has been done by you and the team in what's been a most difficult year. I have a couple of questions, all actually relating to page 4, and it's really on paragraph 18 and the new IPOF system and the delays, I suppose, Emily, in getting that up and running. We did hear a little about this at ARAC, and at both that, and we heard at ARAC as well, and also in the Northern Ireland media in the last sort of 24 hours about the fact that we'll not be fully ready in terms of sort of border control posts until the middle of 2021. So I suppose my question is, what are we able to do as a backstop, as it were? So what can we put in place to get done as best we can in the first half of 2021? Second question is around the difficulty with district councils in Northern Ireland to recruit and train staff, and how are we addressing that, and what successes can we expect to get back up to where we need to be? And then the third and final question on that, and it's really just in relation to the last paragraph 22 in relation to the Trade and Agricultural Commission. And I suppose the question is how do we ensure that there's no mixed messaging between ourselves and TA, and particularly in one of the aims in the recently published terms of reference, which refers to their responsibility to reflect consumer interests. So just to make sure that we have that open dialogue with TAC so we can avoid any confusion. Thank you.
I'm going to let Emily and Colin and others come in, but just on that last point, Colin, I'm speaking to Tim Smith, who's currently chairing the Trade and Agriculture Commission later on today. And it is interesting to note that I don't think there's a proposal to give the Commission any dedicated staff resource or anything like that. So I think they're in a very different place from us, as well as the terms of reference being quite different. Emily.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Colin. So on the Northern Ireland, actually, let's go to the Trade and Agriculture Commission point first, given that that's what you were just talking about, Heather. So we also are having very good conversations with Department for International Trade colleagues and DEFRA colleagues to make sure that there isn't any conflict between the two remits of the organisations. I think it's pretty clear there isn't. And in fact, the press release that was put out about the proposal did acknowledge the role of the Food Standards Agency and Food Standards Scotland in protecting the consumer interest and in food safety. So, I mean, we are in very live conversations about that, but I'm reasonably confident it will be okay. And we're also very fortunate that we've seconded Steve Wern, former Global Affairs Director at FSA, over to DIT, who's working with the current Commission on their report. So it feels like we've got good connections. On Northern Ireland, so we are really hopeful that the Joint Committee's conversations particularly about the supermarket trusted trader scheme, will result in the right conclusion in terms of food safety. We don't think there's any increased risk of product coming in. The question is whether the checks and so on that the EU are saying are needed are actually going to be needed in place from the beginning of January. We're hopeful that the right conclusion will be come to there. If it's not, then we're obviously doing our best to be ready for alternative arrangements, and there's an expectation of a phased approach. I mean, what I'd like to do is ask Maria and potentially Rebecca to come in and just say a little bit more about what's going on there. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. I'll start and Rebecca can help me. On the actual border, the ports of entry column and the inspections and checks that will be carried out there. While it is true that DERA has acknowledged that they won't have full capability up and running before sort of mid-21, it is true that we are working very closely with them to build contingencies. And that those contingencies include actually building physical structures at Larne, Belfast and Warrenpoint. And that will facilitate the checking to take place, albeit at a reduced level. We have been working very closely with European Commission officials to make sure that we are remaining in line with their requirements for day one, start of January. And then if I could cover off your point on local authority training and the availability of officials. Just to say, most of the people that we require to carry out the checks at the ports have already been recruited, and we have been working hard to make sure that those people have the right training and that they're able to do the job that they need to do at the start of January. Now, that includes online training, and we've given a little flavour of that in Emily's report. But as well as that, we've provided the councils with a temporary derogation from the Food Law Code of Practice, which means that they can bring in officers who may not have the full capability of the strict requirements that we have in the Code of Practice for their competence. And that means then that they can bring people on and train them on the job and then allow them to gradually start to do the checks that we need them to do.
Thank you. Colin, did you want to come in any of that, or are we?
No, that's comforting. You know, I suppose my only question to Maria on that, with the relaxation on the Food Law Code of Practice, I'm sure that's been risk assessed and considered to be low risk.
Thank you. Rebecca's put her hand up. I don't know. Did you want to come back on that point, Rebecca?
I was just to say, Colin, you're right to ask about the risk, and you know, within our EU transition programme, we're reviewing the risks now, and we're taking a very proactive approach now in this run up to the 1st of January, and obviously part of a wider government system on this, and we're in daily contact with DEFRA and Cabinet Office, and you know, to make sure that we all understand the risks and the contingencies that will need to be in place.
Thank you. I have got Margaret and then Dave. And could I just remind board members, we've just been using the chat function while people have been coming back on stream, which is absolutely fine. But because our meeting's in public, really important there's no actual discussion of any policy points or anything like that through the chat function. Otherwise, we risk of having something that's happening that's not in public. So just to be sure about that. Thank you so much. Margaret.
Thank you very much, Heather. A couple of things. I was going to ask about the abattoirs, the small abattoirs. My concern was very similar to Tim's, but not so specific. Just the importance that they feel that this is not just a listening forum, and that actions can be, that you know, what we hear may well be turned into actions. Do they feel that there is, you know, light beyond just telling us what their concerns are? Secondly, the Trade and Agriculture Commission. My concern is that there could be confusion outside of the FSA, in particular in government and Whitehall, about who is responsible for food safety and standards, which is us. And it's great that you're going to be keeping up those meetings, Heather. And I assume then that if they don't have staff, they could be funneling issues towards us. And then finally, this issue of exhaustion. And I'm sure lots of people are hearing this. Virtually every sort of board and meeting I sit on, I'm hearing that staff are now really, really tired, particularly ones who are on the front line, as it were. I'm thinking of the inspectors and staff working through stakeholders. And I just wondered, what extra measures could be taken to deal with that issue, because it does look as if this is going to go on for a little while longer.
Thanks, Margaret. Emily,
can I come in on some of those?
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Margaret. So small abattoirs, do people feel that they're being listened to? Colin can comment as well, but my sense is that they do a bit, but not as much as they would like. So I think we have a good team on this from the FSA, and I think we are showing that we're taking it seriously. We give it quite a lot of senior attention. But I think it's also the case that there are many of things that small abattoirs have been asking for that don't fit into the FSA's remit, that sit with others, where they do feel like they're struggling to get traction. And I think it's hard. I do think it's hard for them. So we're keen to continue to pay it attention, but we don't want it just to be a listening forum, but there is more to do. On the Trade and Agriculture Commission, I think it's completely clear that we are responsible for food safety and food standards, and that we've been extremely clear with other government departments about that from the offset, and all of the public statements have been careful to preserve that role, and that we've been given private assurances too that that's completely clear. So I feel very confident about that. We've also been able to offer advice and insight to the Trade and Agriculture Commission. So we can give you more details if you'd like, but we've given them insight into what we know about consumers and their understanding of food, what the issues are for them. And we're being commissioned by them, so I think they know what our role is. And it's also really clear that the Commission is not looking at food safety; it's looking at production standards at that end of the chain. But I think where we do have a role from the FSA's point of view is that the consumer interest in those production standards. So we do absolutely have a role if the consumer interest is shown to be present in relation to environment matters or animal welfare matters. And we will be picking up those issues as we do our consideration of regulated products applications. So we will be looking at the food safety aspects and the other consumer interests, the other legitimate factors, as we call them, in those considerations. For our frontline staff and them being tired, so we it's interesting. I had a staff call on Friday, and one of the things that one of our vet auditors said was, because we do things like send tea and coffee and biscuits and send them our good wishes and so on, and she said, actually what I care more about is health and safety and making sure that we feel protected on the front line. And I have to say we have done a huge amount on that. We take it extremely seriously. For example, we're doing stuff around cohorting, we've done stuff around PPE and so on. But Colin is ready to talk about that if needed. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Colin, do you want to just quickly pick that up, and then I've got Dave and Ruth and me, and then we'll move on.
Yes, happy to. Just on Margaret's point about the Small Abattoir Association, absolutely. I think it's a really good forum for engagement. It is a dialogue. Not every request is going to be in our gift. And of course, many of the issues that are raised are matters for other policy owners, but it is a really good forum now to get those issues discussed openly and hopefully in some cases successfully resolved. In terms of our staff on the front line, I think Emily is absolutely spot on in terms of the concerns we have about their well-being, that there's a weariness because of the length that this pandemic has taken to date, and obviously it will do for some months ahead. We're very concerned about our colleagues in terms of mental health well-being. We're very focused. We have a network of mental health supporters, not least in and around Christmas, and we're thinking about people who maybe staff who live alone and how we can support them. I've been involved, and my colleagues in field ops have been involved in quite regular engagement events, some of them in the evenings, where people can be more social and just discuss where they're coming from. So we are alive to the issues. We're also, of course, our HR colleagues have the mood checker as well, where we try to track how people are feeling. So yes, we're alive to the issues and we're trying to do what we can.
Thank you. Dave.
Thanks, Heather. A couple of quick questions on paragraphs 25 and 26 concerning the 2 salmonella outbreaks. Firstly, on the war-ready chicken products, there was a number of products and a number of retailers affected, but was that actually just one cluster that all went back to the same source, or was it multiple outbreaks? And secondly, on the egg situation, have we understood how that has crept back in to our supply chain? And are we also now confident that we've got our arms around that issue, because we started with 1 batch code and it then grew to about 3 or 4 batch codes? Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Colin.
Yeah, I mean, some of the salmonella issues are still ongoing, but they're not as such a concern to us as they were. The first issue in paragraph 25 is now largely resolved. The second issue, we're still progressing in paragraph 26.
Colin, just on that first one, I think Dave's point on 25 was, did it all come back really to pinpoint to one source or one producer, or was it more widespread than that? Because we often know it was focused. It wasn't as widespread as we were concerned about. Okay, thank you. Ruth.
Sorry. Thank you. Just to commend you on the work you're doing to support staff and acknowledge the challenges that people are facing. I think that's really important and very commendable. My question was about paragraph 16 on risk analysis. It's really heartening to see that over 700 businesses signed up for the webinars. I was interested to know, have you picked up feedback from that process that is material in terms of how you take forward the work? Thank you.
I suggest Rebecca speaks to that. She was it.
Yeah, Rebecca, the queen of risk analysis.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I was just having problems raising my hand. Yes, thank you. Yes, it was. We had 2 very well attended events, Ruth, and we had the majority of people attending were from businesses, although we also had representative bodies and interested parties, including international attendees as well. And generally, they were very engaged in the details of the process, wanting to understand the approach, wanting to understand in particular how the transition would work. So some products currently going through the process in Europe, for example, that might not have completed that. So we were able to answer a lot of those questions. And also some questions about our approach in future. So how the FSA, did we have plans to improve the process in certain aspects? How long would applications take? And obviously, our first priority is to make sure that we provide a really excellent service, that we've got the systems in place, and that we can have that smooth transition. But yes, of course, we are also thinking about how we can provide that really great service to business and to consumers as well. There were also a lot of questions about our approach to transparency. So that was great to be able to answer those and to assure people that this is embedded right throughout everything that we do. And people can see in all of our public information how we're going to meet those commitments. So they were really great events.
And from what Rebecca said, I understood, tell me if I'm wrong, Rebecca, there were sort of 2 different camps. There were the ones who were very familiar with the FSA process for regulated products and just wanted reassurance that we would just be doing it all the same. And then there were others who could see that there were opportunities in us leaving the EU to do it differently and better. So, for example, we think we can go a bit faster than FSA can on a couple of things. Would that be right, Rebecca?
Yeah, that's right. And there were a very wide range of delegates, and yes, we had all of those questions. And as Emily says, we are thinking about as we move forward now. We're really quite excited at the opportunities for us to deliver a really great service and to and to really showcase what we can do as a regulator in meeting the needs of business and protecting the interest of consumers.
That's great. And getting off on the right foot with that level of dialogue with business is so important, and I think will boost their confidence as well. The one point I wanted to raise before we leave the Chief Exec's report is to come back to this point about export health certificates and the requirement for vets to be involved in the provision of these certificates. And I am just concerned that we register that, whilst I absolutely appreciate the importance of businesses being able to export and these certificates and the veterinary requirement, the vets that we employ are absolutely critical to the operation of meat plants, to our commitment on animal welfare and consumers' expectations on animal welfare, as well as on wider public health. So I just think we would want to be very careful about any risk of compromising the standards that the UK has in that area for the sake of supporting, even though we'd be very sympathetic about the needs of the export market. We have to be quite careful that we don't unwittingly compromise the reputation that we have with UK consumers and beyond in terms of the care and attention that's given to animal welfare and standards in meat plants. Moving on. Our first strategic paper is our annual report on surveillance, and Julie and Jesus are going to introduce it for us.
Thank you very much, Heather. Good morning, everybody. And yes, first I'd like to introduce Jesus Alvarez Pinera, who leads the data team and this strategic surveillance work. I'd just like to make 2 points in way of introduction. First, in relation to the end of the EU transition period, given everything that we've already been talking about as we finally end transition, just reassurance that the data science team are actively looking for new and emerging risks and looking to see whether there's anything in addition to the services we've already delivered that are described here in support of our work at the border. The second is to draw your attention to section 6. One of the original objectives of the strategic surveillance work was to inform and be informed by the sampling work. And sampling is the next paper we'll be talking to, but I'm very pleased to see real examples of where we have made those connections and another type of business value that we've delivered through this work. So at that point, I'll hand back to board for any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. It's a really important report, this, annually for the board in terms of our assurance on how we're using surveillance and whether we're focusing on the right questions. In looking at this, can we, on this particular report, can we just hold over any questions about sampling? Because in a way, the next paper we have on sampling is a bit of a deep dive into one aspect of surveillance. So we'll look at the bigger picture at this stage if we can. Mark.
Thank you, Heather. And yeah, just to start off by saying I think this is an excellent report. It contains considerable detail. It's a victim of its own success in that front because it's given me a number of questions that I wanted to ask, I'm afraid. So if I may, I'll just fire them in and all in one go and leave you to respond, if I may. There is reference in the report to non-compliant hit ratios rising by 60% and 132% in one case. I'm interested to know whether that's a really significant improvement or whether we were starting from a low base. That's the issue with percentage increases, really. There is reference in there to ongoing work in terms of being able to share information with other partners and particularly local authorities and needing to consult with legal teams and data governance and all that kind of stuff. And I'm interested to know what the timescales for that are and whether that advice, we're seeking that advice to be future-proof so that we can apply it to other projects as those projects develop. There's mention of the risk likelihood dashboard, which I know is a great tool, and I know lots of local authorities use it, but it is, in my understanding, limited to imported foods. And I'm just interested to know if there's any scope to expand that to domestically produced foods. There's some of the products that are mentioned in here, the systems that you've developed, I think are really interesting and some of them quite exciting. What I'm looking for in relation to that really is just some reassurance about validation of the data we're putting in, because a great system is great, but if you put rubbish into it, obviously you're going to get rubbish out of it. And my last point is around, there's reference to some of the work linked to the achieving business compliance and segmentation in particular. There are references to compliance appearing better in the top 10 companies and data being sparse in certain areas. What I'm concerned about here is that if we're using that to plan some work in that ABC project, that we guard against an unintended consequence, perhaps, that we would be placing a disproportionate burden on maybe small businesses or those in areas where the data is sparse. So that, but just because we're driving that from this sort of data provision. That's my lot. Sorry, there's quite a lot in one go there.
Right. But shall I ask Dave as well, and then we can pick it all up at the same time? Dave, do you want to put your points in the ring as well?
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Julie. There's a huge amount of information here, so apologies if I've missed the answer to my questions in the volume. But in Annex, well, all the annexes, we list all of the activity that we've been doing. I suppose I've just got a little lost as to which of these have moved beyond pilot stage into business as usual and continual use. I think we've demonstrated excellently here all the theoretical benefits we can get from the data surveillance projects. But I guess I just want to understand a bit more about those which have come into continual practical use. And secondly, this lists, I guess, all the successful pilots, just trying to understand our success rate, what kind of failure pilots we've had, and what the common themes are that cause activity to fall over. Thank you.
Julie,
Right.
and pull others in as you wish.
Right. Just warning to Jesus, I'm about to hand all these questions over to him, but I will pick up the one on segmentation for ABC, business segmentation. This is very much work in progress. So it's an initial piece of work to better understand the whole of the business sector, what segmenting them might mean, whether there's any benefit in doing so, whether we're segmenting by risk or by just simple size of business. So there are many different ways that we may be looking to segment, and it is early days. I think we need to see where there might be value, and if there is of any value, we would then take that forward to see whether it's valid or not to segment in that way, how we might act on that segmentation, and certainly very live to ensuring that anything that we do is not disproportionately favouring one type of business over another. But I think before we get to that point of constraining what we do, we need to be as open-minded as possible. So that's where we are on that one. Then Jesus, I'm hoping that you're able to pick up on the other points that were raised. I think you're probably closer to what we've been doing, and also, an update as to where we are today.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I will start with Mark's questions regarding the non-compliance hit ratios, I would say it was a significant increase by using additional information provided by some of our dashboards. I don't have the actual numbers at hand, but I can provide those later. The results that we normally get through sampling are, the numbers are not very high. The reason for that is sampling is actually very expensive. So there is limited amount of sampling that we can do with these ad hoc surveys. But I will provide the numbers offline. In terms of the issues around sharing information, I think because we have done the technical aspect for about a couple of years, we are quite good at the technical aspect of managing data. It is now when we are starting to face the challenges of sharing information and share it appropriately with others, so we don't disclose things that shouldn't be disclosed. So for that reason, we have engaged with the legal teams and with the information management teams, and we have dedicated people within those teams that help us navigate all these challenges. And as we do this more and more often, we are becoming more adept at doing it, and things are faster. But yes, it is always a challenge to seem to have this shiny thing that you are ready to share and not being able to share it until we have complied with the governance. Regarding the focus of the risk likelihood dashboard on imported food, yes, that happened by design. This was an activity that the imports team wanted us to do to support our exit of the European Union. So it has been always focused on imported foods. We could potentially evaluate whether we need to start incorporating results from inline activities as well. Moving on to the validation of data, I think that's a very good point. But let me reassure you that we are the first ones to be very critical with the quality of the data, and some of the data sets that traditionally we have are not good quality, and we are the first ones to say we can do very little with that data. So that's the first point. The second point is that we spend a lot of time improving the data, cleansing the data, eliminating any potential errors from the data. But also, let's not forget that we don't allow any automated decision to happen. All our results are then reviewed and monitored by the experts within the FSA. So there is that additional assurance check that if our result seems to be a little bit off, there is always someone saying, I don't believe this result, and we can go back and see whether it is real or an artifact of the data manipulation. Julie has addressed the segmentation point. So I think I have covered Mark's questions. Moving on to Dave's questions. There are several pieces of work. I will mention risk likelihood dashboard and the signal prioritization dashboard, to mention a couple that have moved beyond the pilot phase. Risk likelihood dashboard is at the moment being used by local authorities and port health authorities in increasing numbers. We are over 60 local authorities and port health authorities are using it, and we are getting very good engagement thanks also to the efforts of the imports team. And more and more of these stakeholders are contributing, not only using the dashboard, but also contributing data to the dashboard and storing sampling results in the dashboard. And regarding the signal prioritization dashboard, there is a live feed from that dashboard from the data and intelligence it collects into the new signals and incidents management system. So a lot of the information that the incidents teams is monitoring is coming from the signal prioritization dashboard. So that is a live assistant and is being used constantly. Regarding failed pilots, to be honest, I don't see any of them as a failure, but maybe that's my bias. I think they all provided some information at some point. Some of them was something very specific, providing some light on specific issues. That might have been just stuck in time. We didn't progress with that. I think the what we face a little bit of issues is of an issue is with engagement still. Some of the work is picked up by the team quite easily. Some other pieces of work are a little bit we don't get the engagement that is required to make them a success. But I think all of them provided evidence of the value of using data when trying to spot or identify risks in a predictive manner.
Jesus, thank you for covering that so thoroughly. I know Robbie wants to come in, but I just think on that last point, the board would want to do all it could to reinforce the value we attach to the huge advances we're making in this area, and engagement from across the whole of the FSA is, I think, something that we expect because this is really valuable and enlightened approaches to the way in which we protect the public and we help business get it right. So I think we would want to keep an eye on that engagement level. Robin.
Thank you very much, Heather. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, just quickly to add to Jesus' points and to come back on Mark's one. So I've seen many of these dashboards and activities, and I've been really impressed. I think there's a lot of power here. And actually, in many ways, we're quite far ahead of other government departments in this area. And so one of the things we've been working hard on with the team is also interacting with other government departments about value addedness here, for example, in terms of communities and businesses. And lastly, on the point about data in and the soundness of the model being critical, that's absolutely true. I think everyone's very aware of that. And I think a key benefit for FSA is our commitment to transparency, in the sense that wherever possible, we'll be publishing these models and making them available to people to scrutinize, which is not common actually in other places, but has a huge advantage that, if there's a glitch that we haven't spotted and somebody else does, we can respond to that, which is not, of course, the case for many other models. So I think that's a really a step forward for us and a real feather in our cap. Thanks very much.
Robin, thank you for that. I think, those of us who've been on this board for a long time will reflect that 4 years ago, we might have been slightly sceptical about our capacity and ability to achieve what we've achieved here. Particularly, it's such an important part of our ability to operate really effectively outside EU systems that we'd come to rely on. So I think we're pushing forward all the time, but we should absolutely take a moment to just look at how far we've come. And I can remember briefing parliamentarians, former chairs of the FSA, and the raised eyebrows that we'd be able to achieve some of the things that we wish to achieve in this area. So it is really, really good progress and full of hope. And we've got the paper later on the agenda about our international strategy. The content in this surveillance paper about artificial intelligence, really thoughtful, very careful the way that we're approaching it, but really exciting steps forward. And already making a contribution in terms of our further strengthening our international reputation and our profile and our relationships and our ability to influence. So this is a really powerful area for us in terms of protecting the public, helping business get it right, our standing in government and internationally. So I think it's really is great progress. Let's make sure it gets driven hard into the rest of the department. Peter, you wanted to come in, and then we will move on.
I'm just picking up quickly Robin's point about transparency and wondering whether the nature of transparency exposes us to people trying to interfere with our data and reading it in a malicious way?
Robin or Julie?
I think that's quite a sort of complicated set of questions within there, Peter. So we actually think being open and transparent is sort of part of our sort of defence, as it were. So we're publishing everything that we can. We're publishing our code so others can see it. It's not possible, or certainly there is security to protect what we do and the services that we provide. So at one level that is protected. The data, much of the data that we're using is actually open data and already published by others, and again others can see that data, so there's nothing, or there's little that is sort of particularly private to what we're doing. And again, I think having that data out there in the public domain means that as if it is compromised, others can see that it's compromised. So that's sort of part of our philosophy of doing this actually in the open. And then just going back to whether data is compromised or invalid or poor quality, again, picking up on the point Mark was making, some of our approach is to triangulate the various data sources that we get and to use these analytics tools to understand the data, to improve the data, as well as to apply them to whether it's making predictions or assessments. So the tools themselves can work to the benefit of getting the data right, as well as producing the end product.
Thank you. That done, we shall move into sampling, a critical component of this whole area of surveillance. Rick, I think you're going to start us off.
I am, yes, thank you, Heather. So the paper you see before you is an update and a progress report based on the high-level sampling strategy that we presented the board in 2019. It's basically, in simple terms, it's about why is sampling important. It's about what the system currently looks like. It's about what we want the system to look like. And then it's a section on how we've gone about implementing phase 1, which we've successfully done, and how we're looking to deliver phase 2 of the sampling framework and taking the plan forward. I think there's three key messages, 3 key points that I'd like to make, high-level points. One is about the fact that sampling is not a standalone thing. It's a very complicated thing, but it has to be considered as part of an integrated surveillance system. And actually, it's very appropriate that it follows on from the strategic surveillance paper that we've just heard about, because it has to be lined up and integrated, and we've seen examples of that. I think the second key point is that sampling absolutely needs to be considered alongside labs as well in terms of capability and capacity. If there's nowhere to send the samples to, your system starts to fall apart. So we have to do that, and we've tried to tease out some of the ways that we're working those 2 parallel streams here. And then the final point is to make that while we have a central role in this area, it's not a problem for the FSA alone, and actually a large part of what we have to do is coordinate across how we work with local authorities, how we work with other government departments, and again, teasing out how we're doing that, taking that forward. So I'll stop there and hand over to the board for questions, and I will turn over my page to make sure I have space for plenty of notes.
Thank you very much, Rick. We did have quite a lot of discussion about sampling at the last board meeting, and then we had to hold on until we got the report. So in a way, some of the questions I know board members raised at the last meeting are now covered in the update that you've given here on our progress so far. I think it's really important from the board's point of view that we focus around where we're going next with this, and also there is a specific point that we're asked to agree to around the publication of brand names, just to be sure that the board is content with
that proposal. In fact, perhaps I might just make sure that we cover that one off now. That did any board member have an objection to where we're proposing to go on brand name publication in particular circumstances? No. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Wider comments and observations on progress here and where we are going. I've got Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gosh, it was a really interesting and detailed paper. So thank you. And an impressive amount of work that you've done in the past year. And apologies in advance to Mark, who I know is the expert in this area, if I'm asking some quite naive questions. And it's if we had a couple of questions, if we had multiple incidents, as happened 6 or 7, 8 years ago over horse meat, where you had to do really widespread testing, do we have capacity? Would we need to go abroad if that happened? And if so, will it be more difficult to access EU labs post-EU exit? And would that slow the time for turning around samples? And then secondly, on the capacity, I don't quite understand why a lot of the work that's been done on looking at lab capacity came after horse meat, where everything said, we need to make sure we do have adequate capacity because it was close. And yet it seems from this that capacity, the number of labs, and also the amount of sampling has actually gone down. And I can understand that with pooling and new technology, you might be doing less, but I just wondered whether that was a problem as well. And that kind of relates back to if we had a major incident or multiple incidents.
Thank you, Margaret. I'm going to get comments from Dave, and I'm going to look and see if Mark is shaking his head that he's got a long list or a short list before I get his comments as well. It's a short list. Dave and Mark, and then we'll go back to the officials together. Dave.
Thanks, Heather. 3 questions, if I may. In Annex 1, we note the 43,768 tests that we did in 2018-19. How many should we have done? Because sampling is normally a statistical exercise where you can kind of work out how many you should be doing, I suppose. So it'd be interesting to understand how well that compares to what we would like to do. We've touched on before some of the challenges around false negatives and false positives in hypoallergenic testing. So understanding what progress has been made on that in the last 6 months, particularly given our discussions that can be coming up as a board over the next 2 or 3 months. Good to see, I'd kind of forgotten this, silly really, in 2.5 we recognise that food business operators, particularly the larger food manufacturers, do a huge amount of testing themselves. So what level of access are we getting through FIN to anonymised data on these certificates of conformance and positive release tests that all of our major food businesses are doing day in, day out?
Thanks, Dave. And Mark?
Thanks, Heather. I probably just should start by reminding colleagues that I do have a registered interest in that I do manage one of the official control laboratories. So I'm going to keep my comments brief as a result of that. There is reference in the report to market failure around the provision of laboratories. That was something that Professor Elliott identified in his report in relation to horse meat, and he had 1 or 2 suggestions for how that could be addressed. So I'm just interested to know whether we're looking at that. I'm very conscious, as Rick's already pointed out, that this isn't just an FSA thing, and so it's not just our responsibility. There is a comment in the report around standardization of data. Oh yes, please. As soon as we can get some work done on that, that would be really helpful, but it is a real challenge across a whole range of laboratories and partners that use different information systems and different coding systems, but it's really important if we want to share that data and use it. And my last comment is really a personal bugbear. In Annex 2, there is a distinction made between local authorities referring matters to local authorities and referring matters to trading standards. And trading standards are a local authority service. So if we mean by local authorities environmental health, from my point of view, could we say that, please? Because it's really important to understand where our partners sit in the big scheme of things.
Thank you for that reminder. Rick.
I'll start with the easy one. Thank you, Mark. Apologies. Yeah, we'll make that clarity on EHO versus TSOs. Thank you. So going back to Margaret's question about capacity, and I think a lot of questions have been asked about lab capacity, and I think this is one of the major issues. I think if you were to ask me the very simple question, do we have enough capacity? I would give you a very simple answer. Yes, we do. And obviously there needs to be a lot more nuance to that. And actually, why am I so confident in that answer? Well, I think there's a number of things that we have done that have looked at that and have given us that assurance. One thing to clearly state, and I think this sort of goes a bit back to Dave's question as well, is how much is enough? And I don't think I'll be honest, we don't have a simple number. We don't know that 100,000 is great and 80,000 is not enough. It does have to be very much based on the risk. It's a year-to-year sort of variation. Again, there's often comes with this question of, do we have enough capacity to deal with incidents? Well, part of the annex in there is to show that we have had a number of incidents and the system hasn't fallen over. But again, where can we access other laboratories? We are doing a piece of work with UCAS, the UK Accreditation Service at the moment, to try and understand more about the national capability. The results are coming in. That has shown us, I mean, they're surveying up to 100 different laboratories that have food testing accreditation. So there's a lot of laboratories in the UK that can do some form of food testing. In terms of capacity, some of the things that are really falling out of this, you know, in the data that Dave alluded to, we've got something like, I think it's about 34,000 and 36,000 microbiological tests were carried out. There's one laboratory in the UK that's done 600,000 in a year. So there are some laboratories that have massive capacity. They tend to be in the commercial sector and they're doing a lot of that work there. But as we know, money will talk, and if you need to, you can buy into extra capacity as required. The question that Margaret said about the sort of reduction in lab capacity and then the reduction in sampling, we obviously know that part of the challenge here is around the fact that there is this link between the sustainability of the lab capability and the number of samples that are flowing through. So we have seen that this year, where the number of samples going to official control labs and other labs indeed has fallen significantly because of COVID-19. We have personally tried to step in and address that, and part of this in terms of market failure is moving in there, and we have put out a £500,000 sampling program that has been twofold. I mean, it's there to look at the disruption caused by COVID-19 and to gain intelligence and understand risks associated with certain foods. But it's also there has had the added benefit of being able to provide some much needed sampling through to the laboratories. The official control labs have been leading on this. I think the other point to address there as well is we often talk a lot about lab capacity, and actually one of the things that we've been looking at is lab capability. So for example, if you're running a particular type of test, it's relatively simple. It says relatively simple to sort of double the number of samples you do. You can bring more staff, etc. However, if you are asked to start testing from scratch and you don't have that capability already in your laboratory, it's a massive effort because you need accreditation, you need training, etc. And that is one reason why we're looking very closely at how we develop the national reference lab capability within the UK. So again, these are repositories of this expertise and these new methods that can be cascaded. And you see from the annex, when we look at those incidents, how national reference labs like Ferret and others have responded in things like fipronil, where they had the core methodologies and then were able over time to do surge testing and then cascade it down. So again, national reference labs alongside official control labs are a critical part of the process. Finally, I think there was a question about, Oh yes, methods, false positives, and false negatives, food hypersensitivity. One of the things we're trying to do there is address that, and this actually came up in the authenticity steering group that we attended on Monday. It's a cross-government group. It's also got industry and national reference labs involved. And again, these are the sorts of things that are being addressed. There's also a conversation around data standards, and I think that's where this cross-government, cross-industry, cross-expertise, academia kind of interface is really important. My final point is Mark's one about market failure and addressing that, and I think again it's a part of two components of how we address some of this market failure. First of all, is how do we look at targeted risk-based sampling programs, and I think we are considering that. So if you look at the COVID-19, thinking about that as a pilot and how we might carry that forward. I mean, bear in mind this year we probably are spending the best part of £1 million on sampling, both the COVID sampling, import sampling, sampling coming out of Wales, and also some work out of RCD. But the other area is, of course, research and how we can then use research to develop expertise and new methodologies. And again, we're talking very closely with UKRI about future programs and how we might develop those. And I'll stop.
Thank you. You've generated a heap more interesting questions there, Rick, with all of that. Robin and Julie, and then I'm going to come back to Ruth and Dave.
Thanks, Heather. Just quickly to add on Dave's question about sampling numbers and Rick's response. I mean, I think, you know, as a scientist, I'd always say you can never have too much sampling, because the more you have, the more you can do with it and the more hypotheses you can generate. But that's different, obviously, than the kind of specific question of testing official controls. However, as you can imagine, there's a much wider conversation in lots of departments about sampling at the moment, in particular in relation to COVID-19, and a lot of exciting new technologies coming out there that we're very much plugged into. So I think in terms of wider surveillance, for instance, things like wastewater monitoring and those kind of technologies that are not yet available but coming on board, we're relatively optimistic that we might be able to significantly ramp up the sensitivity and amount of sampling for kind of hypothesis generation in the future. So yes, the more the better, but I think there is a lot of exciting stuff on the horizon. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Julie?
Thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. That's the approach we're taking. Again, another example where we're trying to take as wide a view as possible across the whole of the landscape, so it is optimized to generate the best value for money insight we possibly can. And linked into that, I think Finn was mentioned. So we've agreement in principle that we can take a cut of the Finn data and explore what it might show us, and to look at that data outside the arrangements that we've already got with Finn, to use that data just to look for crime. So this is agreeing that we could look at the data for a slightly wider purpose, but that's work in progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Ruth?
Oh, thank you. Really important progress on sampling, and thank you for that. I noticed in the design of the National Institute for Health Protection, the successor to Public Health England, that research and reference laboratory capability is a key part of the objectives of the new organisation. So I'm looking for assurance, really, that our needs are being factored into the thinking and design around the new body. Thank you.
Sorry, did you want me to? Do you want me to come in on
Dave?
Yeah.
I'll let Dave come back with comments and then you come to you. Can't tell what you're saying, Dave.
That's why they were picked up in the supplemental answers from Robin and Julie. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Rick.
Yeah, there's absolutely conversations we're having with ongoing conversation with Public Health Wales, Public Health England about that ongoing capability as part of our National Reference Lab. We are currently doing a bit of a review of National Reference Lab, mainly because we're in a situation where we're in a situation where a lot of the sort of contracts are sort of coming to an end, but it also gives us an opportunity to look at some of the gaps and see how we might talk about those. So one of the things we recently had was a bit of a workshop with ourselves, FSS and UKRI, and it threw out some of the sort of areas of skills gaps, talking about some of those niche areas. And again, we look at the portfolio of national reference labs and see if we've actually got the right one. Obviously, a lot of these are determined by the EU, but also there's no reason why we couldn't have extra centres of excellence or national reference labs on top. And again, certainly on the micro side, it would absolutely have to be done in hand in glove with Public Health England to make sure that it's done in a joined up way. The final point, just wanted to say about the sampling numbers, and I did miss that point, Dave, sorry. We have, and we're just about to publish new internal sampling guidelines. They've been massively updated. It's part of the action in phase 1. And one of the things there we do talk about a lot about statistics and how we will start using the stats team within FSA to look at sampling programs. So part of the answer is, yes, sometimes lots is good, but sometimes you can get away with a smaller number. That is enough, depends on the power you need. So it does vary, and that's why you need a statistician to look at it and tell you what the right number is. And 300 is the magic number.
Very happy to build into the board training programme and module on statistics. But that just might reflect my own quirky interests. Thank you for that. I think what you're hearing from the board, Rick and colleagues here, is the endorsement of the direction and the priorities that you're taking on this. This never lessens in its importance to the board. Obviously, we've seen the wider context in terms of the surveillance paper that we've just talked about. We continue to be bothered about the critical dependency on lab capacity and capability, to reflect your point, at the NRL as well as the official control lab level. And in terms of crises, Elliot's point was significantly about how you can also prioritise access when you need a surge in sampling in the midst of a crisis, and whether we can fight against industry's demand that's placed on labs at the same time. And I think the board will always be keen to know how do we know this is working? What are our measures of effectiveness and value for money here? And finally, I think we'd really welcome the signals that FinData is now finally starting to play into this. It's a really important step for us, I think, that, and the potential to also harness data from business sampling programs, very valuable to us. So thank you very much for all the progress there. I think in previous board meetings, I come back 2 or 3 years, I think we've given our colleagues on the exec team's official level a bit of a hard time around sampling. So it's really super to see the progress that's being made now as we recover from a situation many of us inherited, which just wasn't working, and the funding wasn't being delivered to things that were making a material difference. So turning this around is a really good level of progress. Thank you. Turning on to our next item, Julie, a proper welcome to you. It's lovely to have you here as Deputy Chair of the Advisory Committee for Social Sciences for the Food Standards Agency, and we have your annual report in front of us, but I think you might have something to share with us just to kick us off with the conversation.
Yes, thank you, Heather, very much. Very pleased to be deputising for Professor Mickey. As you're probably aware, she's on the Government SAGE committee, which is often very pressing, but she sends her apologies and best wishes. So thank you for inviting me along. For those I haven't met, my background is in political science and environmental policy, but I've also held quite a number of roles over the years that are to do with food and agriculture. And the work of this committee, I think, is tremendously important and exciting. I'm going to take the paper pretty much as read, but I do have, in case it's helpful, a couple of slides, which is actually a bit of an update since we wrote the paper, because, of course, they're prepared quite a while in advance. And I'm going to talk mainly about our assurance working group, which is perhaps the biggest part of our work at the moment, partly because, Heather, I know you're particularly interested in how this is going. And I feel we've had on this group and across the committee work, actually, but particularly on this group, a very productive year. We've been able to make the most of remote working despite the pressures on everyone's time. So we have got through a lot on this. So just to sort of give you a sense of what that really looks like, since we last reported, we've done really a complete sort of end-to-end scoping of the relevant processes and policies for social science research. And when I say end-to-end, I mean everything from the framing through procurement and, as it says there, implementation, and very importantly, evaluation of the impact of that research. And then we follow that up by looking in great detail at a lot of, and there are a lot of these processes and policies to look at, but how we might consolidate that into sort of assurance that it's all working in a coherent way. And we zeroed in on project evaluation and impact, I think partly because in the experience of quite a lot of us on the committee, that is something many, many organisations struggle with, is to get the work done and then really assess what's the impact it's had. And that's always worth systematising in a very clear way. And also particularly the quality assurance around procurement, because of course the research can only have the impact if it's procured in a really sort of intelligent and detailed and thought through way, which is not to say that research hasn't been, it's just that there's always improvement could be made there. And the next phase of work is to try and systematize all that by going back to first principles about how we evaluate what is good science, giving some guidance and toolkits that enables people to ask all the right questions when they're commissioning science, particularly as I think we're very aware this is often done under considerable pressure. That demands are quite urgent sometimes. Some projects are long run, some are very short run. So how does everyone in the whole process make sure they've thought about it thoroughly, right from thinking, do we actually need this research? Are we really filling a gap here? Or has this question maybe already answered elsewhere? Through to how do we frame the procurement, the tenders for this in a way that will appeal to as broad a range of researchers as possible? How do we frame the budget so that's going to appeal to the right kind of researchers? How do we get it out to people? How do we assess whether what we get back is good quality? And right through to the end, where how do we evaluate its impact in the organisation? So we've really done a lot of detailed work trying to help consolidate what's there. There's a lot of good practice there, but it can be consolidated and refined. And I think we've had a really good relationship with the social science team and teams beyond that, and a very good reception for producing these kind of toolkits and guidance. You know, we hoped we weren't sort of delving into areas that people would feel we were being very critical of what they're doing. That certainly wasn't the intention. And actually the opposite has been true. We feel a lot of this has been embraced, which is really, really positive. So that's just a bit on where the assurance working group has got to. And that toolkit in point 3 is something we're going to commission in earnest in the new year, particularly when everyone's past the immediate pressures of EU exit, which of course is putting pressure on very many teams. And then the second point there about the kitchen behaviours working group, this is new work. So we're just launching this. And so in effect, our committee will help do exactly what we've been talking about under the assurance process, which is take a kind of end-to-end look of how this is being commissioned, implemented, used and evaluated. So it's very good timing that we've been through that thought process, and then we can exercise it on an actual group of projects. So we think that will be, we hope that will be really helpful. If I can have just the second slide then, please. And this is just a reminder of the ones you've heard about before. Again, we think these have had really productive inputs, and we continue to be on tap and available to augment any of this work. But most of these are signed off now, although we do have ongoing conversations, as you can imagine, about risk communication as we go past EU exit and the agency's new role in risk assessment and management, and very, very importantly, communication of risk. So that's all I wanted to highlight. Thank you very much, Chair, and very happy to take questions. Thank you.
Julie, thank you ever so much. Just before I bring in colleagues with questions, I am really bothered about that assurance question. I'm really pleased with the progress that you're making and the care that the committee's taking on it, because that point about how we can be confident we know we've got the right evidence from the best sources when we're using it, to rely on it in framing risk management decisions, is so important in terms of public confidence and business confidence, but also in making sure we've got a robust a system that's robust in the face of perhaps challenge that's trying to fly a kite around the UK's post-EU systems. So it's really important for us that we get that assurance, and you and colleagues are doing something really valuable there. But also on your second slide, the work, for example, that George Gaskell led around the reshaping food and urine, improving that, or the work on getting us to a commentary on risk communications principles, which I know colleagues on the committee worked over the weekend to help us get that right, so that we didn't hold up day one delivery. The kitchen behaviours working group is a really good idea. So there's a lot going in here, and just 2 slides of summary or even the full report perhaps doesn't do justice to the amount that we're getting from members of the committee, and we're getting it with real style and thought, and drawing on your networks in a way that's really valuable to the FSA. So thank you.
Thank you.
I've got no, I haven't. I've got Tim and then Colm.
Thanks for that, and yes, thank you for a great report. Having been involved in research probably over a period of 30 years in research funding at least, I was really interested how you evaluate, what sort of framework you have to evaluate applications based on the knowledge of what sort of research is going to deliver usable findings, and then how you look at those usable findings against the original funding base. So I think that would be really interesting to just learn a little bit more about. I guess the other issue also is that what is the size of the research capability in the review of those research proposals, and how can you maintain an objective view of the value of that research when you're possibly drawing on a relatively limited source of expertise? Maybe it isn't, but it'd be nice to hear more about that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, so as the committee, we wouldn't be involved in making all those kinds of judgments ourselves. We're trying to provide a toolkit by which the teams can do that. And so one of the first things we've done is have a sort of evaluation framework, which certainly I can ask the team to send you that so you can have a look at it. It's being rolled out for the social science provision first, and then maybe rolled out more widely. In terms of the amount of resource for it, that's not something we've yet looked at. We are going to take a sample of some of what comes back from evaluations. And we've also been involved in some of the looking at evaluation of tenders. So there are 2 things here, how tenders are evaluated for what's good research and how evaluation is done of final impact. And I think we will try and sample across some of those things just to see how that's being done. I couldn't honestly comment on the resource available within the teams to do that at the moment, but that is certainly something we could look at.
Colm?
Sure, thank you. And Julie, thank you very much for a great report. I've just a couple of very quick questions on it. And in terms of the current 2 working groups, and obviously the importance of both those pieces of work around assurance and particularly risk communications, is there a delivery timescale as to when those reports will come through? And I suppose aligned to that, a question, are we in the FSA making as much use as we could of social sciences and particularly of behavioural science? And I'm thinking of the previous working group that you led yourself on that. So are we doing as much with that research as we could? And then finally, just a quick question around the planned working group on kitchen behaviours. I'd just like to hear a little bit more about what would be involved in that.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. Timescales. Well, the assurance working group, we're going to probably do a lot of work early next year, and I think we'd probably get through the bulk of it during the course of next year. Some of it has been delayed, as I said, by pressures on the teams, coping with all the issues around EU exit. But I think we'd hope to produce our toolkits and then perhaps go into a sort of review capacity on it next year at some point. It's a bit difficult at the moment to know exactly how that will go. Sorry, your second point was about use of behavioural, the behavioural science aspects.
Social sciences in general, but particularly behaviour.
Social science in general, yes, I think the agency's, through its social science capability and the assistance I hope it's getting from our committee, is making very good use of social science. I think the recognition that there are social science dimensions to just about all its functions is certainly coming through to us, given the kind of work we've been asked to do and the kind of questions we're being asked. I think that's very true. And I think on behavioural insight, definitely. And of course, you know, the fact that our chair, Professor Mickey, is a very strong behavioural science professor means that she is paying particular attention to how that's applied. And our early working group helped prioritise among a large number of propositions for using behavioural insight. You know, I think there was great enthusiasm for it. And I think our sense was, well, there are only so many you can do thoroughly. So we helped to prioritise how that was used and helped to make sure it's done rigorously. So yes, I think there's very good recognition of that. Did I miss one in the middle? I'm sorry.
No, just a very quick comment. I'm intrigued by the kitchen behaviours.
Yeah. I've not been close to that myself. It is really just kicking off. So I think the idea is there's quite a long run programme to do observed behaviour, because one of the things social scientists and probably everybody knows is there's a big gap between what people say they do and what they actually do sometimes. So the idea is to try and, you know, actually observe behaviour in kitchens and see what happens. I think what's great is that is just at tender stage. I think the tenders have just gone out and we've been involved from the very beginning by being asked to comment on the framing of the tender. So that means as we act as it said in the slide, a kind of steering group function, we'll be able to comment on every single stage of how that's going and assist it and then look at the impact afterwards. So it's quite a big programme and I hope it will shed real light on how we do talk to people about, you know, their behaviours and the reasons they might need to adapt them.
Thanks, Julie. I'm going to bring Julie Pearson and then Rebecca has the last word. Back to kitchen behaviour, I think. Julie.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Julie. If I can maybe just pick up on a couple of the questions. Again, the use of social science, absolutely agree with what Julie said there. I think there's a much stronger pull in the FSA for this insight, whether it relates to businesses' attitudes through EU exit or it relates to COVID-19. So those external drivers are really sharpening the pull for this insight. The second is, I can't exactly remember who asked the question as to whether there were enough providers of this sort of research or whether there were only a small number and then therefore that might be driving a form of bias. Reassurance that we have hundreds of individuals on expert panels and there are many providers in the marketplace. So I don't see that as an area of concern.
Thanks, Julie. And Rebecca.
Thank you, Heather. Yes, so on the subject of kitchen behaviours, I was reminded of our question at the beginning of the meeting from Keith Warrener about why the FSA doesn't promote the use of meat thermometers, particularly when cooking burgers and nuggets. And I think the relevant point here is that it's really important when we produce our guidance that it's accessible and usable by everybody. And a meat thermometer is an excellent tool, but not everybody has a meat thermometer. And that's why our guidance focuses on things like making sure that you cook food at the right temperature for the right length of time. That's the gold standard of keeping cooked food safe, making sure that meat is cooked all the way through. And you can do that by checking that it's steaming hot and you don't need a meat thermometer. From time to time, we have in the past given advice, particularly over the Christmas holidays, about using thermometers, because that's a time when we know that many people might use them when they don't do that routinely. So, as I said, this really illustrates the importance of how we understand what consumers actually do in their kitchens, and the advice is framed in the way that makes it usable by everybody. And I should just add that this is very different, obviously, from our advice to caterers and food businesses who need to use thermometers as part of their safety processes, and we have very detailed guidance on that. So I hope that answers the question.
Rebecca, thank you for picking that up so thoroughly. Julie, thank you ever so much for being here. Thank you for the report. I hope you're taking back to the committee not just the welcome and the endorsement of our board, but our deep interest in your work and the way that you're adding value to so many aspects of the FSA's responsibilities.
I will do. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Board members, I'm going to give you a choice. We could have a 10-minute break, but we're about 30 minutes from the end of the meeting. So put your hand up if you want the break. Emily. Sorry, you've been overruled. You have to disappear for 2 minutes if you really need to go and blow your nose. We will carry on to our next item, which is a bit less than an annual update, just because of the way that agendas have flexed during coronavirus. So it's not quite a full year's update on progress around our EU and international strategy. And we have Paul Morrison, obviously, with us as an exec member, but Liz Stretton, who's our head of EU and international strategy, is joining us as well. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you. Good morning.
Great. Thank you very much, and thank you in particular, Liz and team, for who've done the work both in the preparation of this paper and a lot of the activity that's in it. So, as the chair said, this is the annual report, slightly less than annual, but thinking back to when we last presented the report on the international strategy, there was one certainly known unknown that was there, which was what the future relationship was going to be with the EU. But there was also an unknown lurking there, which was the pandemic and the impact that that's had on the nature of the international work we're able to conduct. At its most basic level, as a logistics level, and how we can actually conduct that business. So what you've got in the paper is just a re-articulation of what the strategy is, and an opportunity just to check in that still feels in the right space. A report which is illustrative of some of the work that we've been doing, and I say it's illustrative because actually there's more than we've just reported on here, but just to give a flavour of the sense of it, and then moving into a bit of a articulation of what our priorities are going to be moving forward. So just in terms of the strategy, what we've been focusing on, as the paper says, there's an element of it which is around making sure we've got the right input of the activity that's going to retain the FSA's reputation and impact, which is an outcome in itself, how it is that we can form the right or build on, maintain the right relationships that allow us to collaborate internationally, both multilaterally, particularly through Codex, and the importance we're placing on the support of a UK candidate for the chair of that, other multilateral bodies, the bilateral relationships that we are going to have, all informed, of course, by the fact that a lot of the institutional engagements that we've had previously through the EU will not be there, and therefore the multilateral engagements and the bilateral engagements will have to reflect that fact. But also, as well as all of those very direct and specific engagements that we are having through our contacts, Codex, the other bodies that are presented here, the other engagements that we've been able to have, we are also thinking about how we can appropriately insert ourselves into the wider discussion. So there's a reference in the priorities moving forward, for example, to the UN Food Summit, primarily focusing on sustainable development goals, but an opportunity for us to be enmeshed in conversations around international global food systems conversations. So the approach that we're describing going forward is more of the same around the engagement of pushing through Codex, the multilateral engagements, thinking about how we can build on relationships that are there that allow us to collaborate, putting them in the service of our overall, both our overall strategy, but also thinking about where we can work to promote what we're doing on regulatory reform, but also learn from international partners in that context. And maybe there's a couple of bits that I would just emphasize in that, the approach to give assurance to the board. Firstly, we are taking an approach which is full country, in the sense that as far as the FSA is concerned, the working groups around setting our international priorities and thinking and working through what we need to deliver involves colleagues from across FSA in the 3 countries, but also is an important part of the MOU that we have with Food Standards Scotland in how we deliver. The other thing I should say is it is a period of uncertainty and volatility in the international space. We will need to, I think, within the year, take stock of where the final negotiations around the relationship with the EU has left the UK, as well as the fast-moving emergence into what may or may not be a new normal at the end of COVID-19. So we will continue to discuss through the year whether the range of priorities that we've got here still feels right. And then just lastly, as an addition, which isn't in the paper, while Liz is part of the EU and international team currently, what we are going to be doing is embedding our international strategy team alongside our FSA strategy function, so that it really does feel as if it's embedded. It reflects the fact that international is now much wider than maybe the primarily EU focus that it may have had before with the institution, and that's the approach that we're going to take. So I will stop there, Chair. A bit of an update on what we've done. Any questions, particularly in detail, I'm sure Liz can pick up, but just inviting a steer on whether we're in the right direction as far as priorities are concerned.
Thank you, Paul, very much. Thank you, Liz, for the work you've done on this as well. And I think reflecting where the board's been previously on this, you're absolutely on point in terms of the things that we wanted to be focused on. Were there any questions from the board around progress, direction? Obviously, with the unanswerable here is, how do we know it's working? But I think some of the areas of collaboration, point we touched on earlier about the World Economic Forum's interest in the work that we're doing on AI, etc. Those are all reflecting the strength of our network and our visibility internationally. Colm.
Chair, thank you, and Paul, thank you very much for what I read as quite a hopeful report. Obviously, a lot of work going on, and the post-EU world will be just around the corner. We recognise that. I'm delighted to see so much work going on the international agenda. I suppose a couple of questions for me. I did note in 3.12 Emily's attendance at the biannual heads of food safety agencies, which is for both EU member states and neighbouring countries. I suppose I'm just wondering, come the 2nd of January, when we will become a neighbouring country, will we still have access to that? And just the second question, we talk in 3.14 around the FSA's secondee to the FAO-WHO. Is secondee, use of secondees another way to strengthen our international relationships?
Emily, do you want to come in on that?
Thank you. Yes, just on the heads of agencies point. So because the UK left the EU on the 31st of January, actually we are already a neighbouring country. We're not about to become that in January. So the fact that I have attended that meeting this year is part of it. Yes, we still belong to that group, and they're very keen to have us there and find it very useful. The secondees point is a really interesting one, and we should think about it.
Thank you. And Colin.
Just wanted to highlight the value of our secondee in Geneva with Infosan. Infosan becomes a much more important body to us with departure from the EU, and our secondee's been there for over a year now, and has helped us working through the working group that's been established that we've helped to facilitate in respect of incidents. So that's worked really well. It has meant Philip Randall's getting up at unearthly hours, like 5 o'clock in the morning, but it's a really good network, and it's working well.
Thank you for that update. I just wanted to ask if you could give us any more detail on the revised timetable for the appointment of the next Codex chair.
Sure. Liz, do you want to pick that one up?
Yes, thank you. As far as I'm aware, the meeting which was due to happen June this year didn't take place. So, well, latest I've heard on that, if they pushed the whole timetable for the year, so we're expecting the election to be June, July 2021.
Thanks, Liz.
I think it might actually now have been pushed back to November next year.
Okay, they've gone back to November. Sorry, I hadn't caught up with that one yet. There is a lot of conversation still going on, and Codex is one of the forums which, with the COVID hitting, before this hit, they didn't really do anything online. So they've now kind of like moved totally online, which was a space they've never been in before. So
remarkable for an international organisation.
To be honest, if we've got to look at any positives, I think kind of like this could be one, because we are getting a lot more traction with people willing to meet online rather than in face. We miss out on some of the side meetings and the brass buys, which are really important in soft diplomacy, but being able to connect with people online is really helping strategy, and it's helping people keep connected. So it is one positive what we've got.
That's good to know, Liz. Thank you. Peter?
Is there an EU candidate for the Codex chair?
Liz, do you want to come back on that, or Emily?
No, there isn't. It's the candidate that I think most of the countries we expect them to support is Steve Wern, who is our Global Affairs Director, currently Vice Chair of Codex, and currently on secondment to the Trade and Agriculture Commission. There is, I think there are possible other candidates being considered, but not from the EU.
Paul, Liz, thank you very much. I think that's it in terms of the board scrutiny of this sort of not quite annual update, but thank you for the efforts you're making, and it's really good to see that that transition into new areas, as Liz calls it, soft diplomacy. I'm very pleased with the board. Thank you
very much.
Thanks for joining us. Colm, I'll hand over to you. Thank you for the summary report of the ARAC meeting on the 11th of November. Over to you.
Okay, Chair. I won't say there's not a big lot to be said about it. Say we met last week on that, and the report's there, and I will take that as read. On the risk management update, there was a fair bit of discussion, it's fair to say, around one particular risk, which is the one that we're most worried about. Not hard to work out which one that is, which we've just spoken about on EU exit. We did, as part of that, we did split one of the risks into two to separate the reliance on delivery partners, and we separated out the EMT separated out local authority risk against the risk of other delivery partners. And it was reminded that there has been further guidance on risk appetite, and of course we will come back to that at our away day in January, which might be slightly more away than we're used to, but I presume we'll continue to call it our away day. The financial accounts update, we are very late, as we know, with delivering the consolidated and Westminster accounts. Both Wales and Northern Ireland were delivered in the normal timescale, which was a tremendous effort in the year that's in it. The assurance we were waiting for is outside the gift of the FSA to deliver. It's quite small in terms of the LPFA assurance. It's now been completed by Mazars and NAO, and we would have hoped to have digital sign-off by the FSA accounting officer this side of Christmas. We're aiming for the 10th of December with the default of the 17th of December. Remember that we can only lay accounts in Westminster on a Thursday. So hopefully we'll get that. We have a bit longer, but the ARAC would be keen that we get it done this side of Christmas. We heard from the head of audit assurance around the progress report, which we're quite satisfied with, particularly given the last 8 months of COVID and a lot of staff not available to John. And we looked at the planning, the early stage of the planning process. We'll come back to that. Again, the ARAC do meet early in the morning of our away day in January. And under AOB, we did consider a government internal audit agency's report into which looks at best practice in IRACs across about 93 audit committees in government. And we felt we're doing quite well. As always, there's one or two things we can learn and do better, and we'll take that on board. We did agree that some cybersecurity training should be provided, but it should be provided to the board rather than just IRAC. It's an issue for all of us. Excuse me. And we discussed the concept of deep dive on one topic initially, and we agreed that I would speak to the chair for the chair and chief executive to effectively pick the topic that is of most concern to the board, and we'll take that forward initially. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Colm. Just on that deep dive, that was just for any board member not an ARAC, which is a tiny number. That was an interest I had in how we get the best use out of the time board members are devoting in this area, and that concept of a deep dive in an area that's of interest and importance, and looking at the risk and control framework there. Might be a good thing to do. So I'm glad you're taking that forward. And I have asked the board secretariat to build the points about cybersecurity training into the programme of board training for the future. So they'll pick that up and take that forward. Any observations or questions from those of us not on ARAC, or members of ARAC anyway? No, I love the fact, Colm, that you reminded us that we would all know that, of course, you can only lay your annual accounts before the Parliament on a Thursday. Which
I may be spending too much time with people like Chris Hitton.
Okay, well, in that case, thank you very much for that update, Colm, and thank you again to members of ARAC for the service you do us all there. There was no other business. So in conclusion, I'll simply note that our next FSA board meeting takes place on Wednesday, the 2nd of December at 9:30 a.m, again virtually. And the following week, on the 8th of December, we will have our business committee meeting, 9:30 a.m, again taking place on Zoom. So we look forward to welcoming observers and guests to those meetings. And until then, I shall say goodbye and thank you very much for joining us. Bye.